Hello.
Hello, Kashif.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you loud and clear. Good evening.
Good evening.
And thank you for agreeing to speak to me. Um, I was just wondering if you could tell me a bit more about yourself, about what you're trying to do with your tweeting and your consulting.
Thank you for contacting me via my website. As you may have read on my blog and everything that I am a Muslim speaker and author, and I speak and write about Islam and issues relevant to Islam and Muslims. My blog is a means for people like yourself to get in touch with me and address any queries or any questions that they may have regarding Islam and the Islamic faith. So this is a bit about myself.
Yes, yes, and thank you for posting on my blog, telling me. We were discussing the verse on whether the Quran allows prostitution or not, and I think you were saying no, weren't you? And I was saying, according to 434, it seemed to be saying it is allowed if you don't force your slave girls, and then you said you said slavery is not allowed, and then I think I said it's not expressly forbidden. So I think that's a bit of the background on how we came to know each other. Is that right?
Yes, I do recall that conversation or communication. I think it was in 2010. That's 8 years back.
Yes, my goodness,
Uh,
how time flies.
Yes, certainly. Yes, something to that effect. I do recall our contact last time. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and I find that, I suppose, as a non-Muslim, having read the Quran, I focus obviously on the bits that interest me, and to my horror, I discover that Muslims either don't know it or disagree with my interpretation, or haven't thought about it at all. It seems so. I have a few favorite ones, which I think I kind of think that um, I, let me think what it's verse 2, sorry, chapter 2, verse 256, and it's the one of truth being clear from error, that one, and about freedom of belief. um, and nobody ever discusses it, and I get so excited about it and say, look, this is what the First Amendment was about, and this was probably what Thomas Jefferson um, was trying to do when he was drafting the First Amendment, because there is this story that he actually bought a copy of the Quran, and there was a record of where which book which bookshop he bought it from when he was doing his legal studies. And I thought that was very interesting, but I kind of I kind of think that maybe Muslims don't know so much about it.
Yes, that is true. Thomas Jefferson's Quran is still there in, I believe, at the Congress or someplace. And when members of Congress from a Muslim background, they are sworn in as congressmen, then they swear by that very copy.
Mm-hmm.
I know personally that Keith Ellison, who is a Muslim congressman, when he was sworn in, he swore his oath on that very copy, on Thomas Jefferson's copy of the Quran.
Yes.
So yes, it is correct. And also there are many other prominent individuals who have referred to the Quran for guidance. For example, Napoleon. Napoleon is known to have said that I wish to start a society or something to this effect. I don't remember the exact words. About forming a European community or something based on Quranic principles.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, yes. So that is also there. But people are obviously, the common people, they don't know.
No, so it sounds like that Napoleon had this idea of an Islamic union as opposed to an Islamic European Union, would you say?
Well, I wouldn't, I wouldn't interpret that or anything to this effect. But what I do know is that Napoleon is on record to suggest that he wishes to found some sort of a political union or community based on Quranic principles. I think if you do research and find out that quote, then one would know what that is all about.
Oh, I certainly will. I certainly will. Well, it seems that um, it seems to me that the problem with Muslim communities all over the world is that they don't follow the Quran. Would you agree with that?
Well, we can't, generalize everybody with just
Oh,
one
I
thing.
mean the governments, really. I'm not talking about individual worshippers, because I suppose going back to the question about free speech and chapter 2, verse 256, um, um, I seem to remember that Pakistan has a lot of blasphemy laws.
Yes, it does have those, but freedom of religion is granted in the Constitution. People are free to worship their beliefs. There are churches are allowed. The preaching of other faiths is allowed.
Okay.
And apostasy is not punishable by death. There have been cases where the Pakistani Islamic courts have ruled that apostates should not be killed because that is against the Quran. We also see, similar examples in other countries as well. And one needs to take into mind that Islamic scholarship is a very diverse body. It is not monolithic, and there are a variety of views. There are scholars who have a liberal standpoint. There are scholars who may have a very narrow point of view, and this is across the board. One comes across such diversity in all Islamic countries, whether Saudi Arabia, whether Iran, whether Pakistan, or elsewhere. So we should not, take the views of one individual or a set of groups of people and think that they represent the entire Muslim community. That should not be done, but all individuals should be analyzed and, they should be seen as an individual viewpoint. Islam is not sort of a, theocracy. There isn't a church that speaks for Islam. There isn't one like you have the Catholic Church and you have, one sort of body that speaks for all Catholics. Muslims aren't like that. So Muslims have a diversity of scholarship, and every scholar is individual. He speaks for himself. He is not speaking for the entire Muslim Ummah as such.
I understand. But isn't Sharia theocracy?
No, no, absolutely not. Sharia is not theocracy.
What is it then?
We need to understand what is theocracy. Okay, theocracy is when the rulers have divinely invested rights of rule. Like you have the Pope. If the Pope establishes a state, then that is a theocracy. The rulers are divinely ordained. They have the hand of God on them. Muslims do not have that. There's no clergy within Islam. There is no sort of, a priestly class.
Are
That
there in Iran a priestly class?
No, Not at all. They are not perfect. No Muslim considers any scholar or any ruler to be infallible. They are human beings. They are prone to error, and they can be removed by other scholars. They can be refuted by other scholars. There is no such thing as theocracy in Islam.
I thought just following God's laws meant theocracy. That was surely the what Moses started with his 10 Commandments and everything. That wasn't that meant to be a theocracy.
Theocracy, the word, if you see that in that context, is something whereby the ruler is appointed by God. For example, somebody comes in and he takes over the powers and he says that what I am doing is from God and I am infallible. This is not the case with Muslims. Muslims
The
implement.
caliph isn't that what that would be a theocracy if we had a caliph? Is that right?
No, not at all. The caliph is also bound by the law. If he transgresses the law, then he is also subject to be rectified.
I see. I mean, I've had it said that a caliph is a constitutional dictator. So if he obviously transgresses against the principles of the Quran, and if enough people notice that he has done so and want to remove him, then they can legitimately remove him. Is that a correct understanding of the rules?
Firstly, he's not a dictator. If there is an Islamic ruler, then he has to consult people with what is called shura. Secondly, yes, the ruler is not infallible. The ruler is human. If the ruler is, for example, found to be guilty of corruption or any other wrongdoing, then the ruler is, liable to be replaced or whatever the course is there. So in Islam, authority, absolute authority is only with God, only with God.
I
God
understand.
and his word. The Quran is infallible. The Quran is what is free from error. And individuals who implement that, or the words and the deeds of individuals, are not infallible. They are prone to error and they don't represent Islam.
I understand. Um, as we're talking about the caliph, could you tell me the difference between a caliph and a sultan?
So these are terminologies that are not, the sultan or something like that. This isn't like something which is amplified within the Quran. These are
The Quran is silent on it, isn't it? It doesn't.
these are
It doesn't say.
historically Muslims. For example, if there were some Muslim rulers who enjoyed power in a particular piece of land, they would start calling their rulers as sultan, as a sultan.
Okay.
But this is not a religious term.
Okay, I suppose it sounds like a sultan is a ruler that happens to be Muslim, but a caliph is someone who is supposed to govern under Islamic principles. Is that would that be accurate to put it like that?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
It depends. It depends.
Yes, it depends on how they rule, how they govern
You
their
see,
country.
we need to understand. We need to separate things from how Muslims have been interpreting things and how specific Muslim rulers or political groups interpret various terms, and how those terms have been described within the Quran itself. I would suggest that if one is doing a study of Islam, then first and foremost, they should come to the Quran and analyze what it is that the Quran says about those terms, about those concepts. And in the light of the Quran, then judge what Muslim thought is all about.
I see. So you can say this sultan passed this law, repeal that law, and that is in accordance with Quranic principles, or that law is not, and this is how you would judge the what's the word, the Islamicness of the ruler. Is that
Yeah.
is that what you're saying? Okay. Um, um, I suppose if you're going to put it like that, then it, I mean, I was just thinking of a situation where, say, all the countries of the world became Muslim, and I mean, it's been put to me that then it would be easier. But I think even in that case, war between Muslim countries would still be possible in the same way that war between Christian countries did happen, and having the same religion doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to go to war, or have civil wars even, in the same way that England did have a civil war, and they were all the same, religion, but obviously the war was between. Oh, I'm trying to remember my history now. It was between king and parliament, and I think the commoners didn't like the king because they thought he was a bit too Catholic, and there was a lot of problems left over from Henry VIII when he broke from Rome and established the Anglican Church. And I guess when it wasn't, when the Church of England wasn't really firmly in control of English religion, they were afraid of the Catholics, and I guess a lot of the fighting was about that. So I guess I'm trying to say that, okay, so every different country will follow the Quran in their own little way, and say, oh, my way is best because I'm Pakistan, or my way is best because I'm Saudi, because people are like that. And I suppose the only way for God to show who is doing it best is to make the country that follows his rules in the best way the most successful. Does that make sense?
Actually, this isn't a criteria to judge the validity of Islam, that whether some countries are following the Quran to the best of their ability, or whether they are economically or socially successful or not. What countries do and what rulers do is not an authority for Islam. The authority for Islam is, first of all, the Quran. Secondly, we as individuals are not here to, make the whole world into a paradise or something like that. We are not here to spread one ideology and make the whole world into Muslims. The Quran.
Aren't you? But there's the jizya.
Sorry?
Well, there is this idea of the jizya that you make non-Muslims pay when you invade them and
No,
conquer
that is
them.
right. No, absolutely not. It is Muslims. When Muslims are in power, then all Muslims pay zakat. That is called zakat. It is obligatory, that amount of money that they pay towards the needy, and jizya is something that is on non-Muslims, because
It's a
non-Muslims don't pay.
tribute, though, isn't it? It's a tribute that a conquered country pays to its conqueror. It's a
No,
conditional tribute in that you can escape from it if you convert to Islam, but you have to pay if you want to keep to your religion.
no, no, that is not true. Uh, Again, one needs to separate what you have been reading by historically or by critics of Islam, and come to the concept purely from a Quranic angle.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a Quranic standpoint, it's something different. It's something which Ahl al-Kitab, people of the book, they give to the central authority, to the Muslim rulers, in return for being not called for voluntary military service and not having to pay zakat. So it's just like a tax. It's a tax that they are paying to the Muslim rulers. It's not something that if they don't pay this, then they will be belittled, or they will lose their right, freedom of religion or something to this effect.
Okay. I mean, that's what I thought, it must have been, because, and I've often argued that a conditional tribute is better than an unconditional tribute, the one that you have to pay whether you like it or not, and you can't escape from it. I don't get the impression that Christians were against acquiring empire, and I think before Christianity was invented, that there were lots of countries that acquired empire, and I suppose in a way it's also seen to be an advancement of civilization, in that if you can do it, then you do it, and then you become a big powerful country, and then after that your problem would be how to keep your empire together. And this brings me back to the British World Empire. It seems from a study of British history that there was a time when the British were even unconsciously Muslim. They were following all the rules that that seemed okay. They were Christians, and Christians follow the Bible, and the Quran has quite similar values and morality to the Bible. So there was a time when the British were interpreting all these rules in a very reasonable, humane, fair, and enlightened way, and perhaps because of that they successfully acquired their empire, and then they did some foolish things, such as participate in 2 ruinous world wars, and then they lost it all, and now they're complaining about Muslims and immigration and all these things that are making them not feel top of the world. But it's not but this is not a problem that's confined to just the British. It's the same all over Europe and also in America, and it seems to me that they are doing certain things wrong, and which is what has caused all these things that ended up in Trump being elected as president. Would you agree?
Actually, I don't have much expertise in this field. I'm not aware of British history. I've not studied it in detail, and also I'm not really a student of politics to comment on what gave rise to Trump getting into power. My scope of research is more related to the religious aspect of things. So I can't really comment on these things. But what I do, what I have to say is that Islam, as it is revealed in the Quran, is not a religion that is to be spread by the sword. It does not call for conquest of lands and, something like creating a supremacy or a world Islamic state, something to this effect. That's not that is not prescribed in the Quran. The Quran specifically says that all the people have to coexist peacefully. They have to coexist peacefully. People of other faiths and Muslims, they have to live peacefully together, and ultimately it is God who will judge the actions of people on the day of judgment. So we are now, if there is somebody who wishes to practice the Christian faith, then the Muslim is not to coerce him or her to practice Islam.
No, because of chapter 2, verse 256.
And many more verses as well.
Yes.
Chapter 2, verse 256, La ikrah fid deen. Let there be no compulsion in religion is just one verse. If you see chapter 18, verse 29, it says, قُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, say the truth is from your Lord. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Let him who wills believe and let him who wills disbelieve. This is the clear Quranic ruling, that any person who wishes to believe anything, that is between him and God. As a Muslim, we only have the duty to convey the message. If the other person accepts it, that's fine, that's good for him. If he doesn't accept it, then I am not to coerce him, to submit him to my way. And Muslims, I believe, are practicing this as a whole. I don't think that Muslims violate that as a whole. Yes, there are some, deviant groups. There are some deviant individuals who have resorted to militancy. But as a whole, I believe that the Muslim community is living peacefully alongside their non-Muslim neighbors.
Thank you for that. Could you, I don't know if this is part of your expertise or not, but I'd be really grateful if you explained to me about the Sunni Shiite split. Perhaps I should have read about it before, but I haven't. But if you could explain it, that would be great.
The Sunni and Shia split, actually, it emanates not because of Islam. It is not something which is because of what is written in the Quran. Islam, the religion, was completed by the revelation of the verse, chapter 5, verse 3. There is a verse which says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa razitu lakum al-islam dina. Meaning, this day have, God says that this day have I completed my religion for you, and have completed my favor upon you, and have chosen Islam for you as a religion, as a deen. When this verse was revealed, Islam and its practices were completed. Now, much later in time, historical disputes arose after the death of the Prophet. Those historical disputes, related to who would be the caliph, who would be, the successor of the Prophet, and things like that. These disputes have no bearing with Islam. The Sunni Shia split is purely because of historical events. It is not because of what is written in the Quran specifically. Sunnis practice the same Islam as the Shias do. They pray 5 times a day. They believe in the same Quran. They practice the same dietary prohibitions. They observe the same modesty rules. They, perform the same Hajj. So the disputes that are in the world, they are not rooted within the Quranic text. Rather, they are historical disputes. They are politically motivated disputes. A lot of it also has to do with the sort of a tussle that was between the Arabs and the Persians. The Arabs largely being Sunnis, and the Persians of Iran being Shia. So these are, disputes involving them. It's not something that is, volatile to the extent that Sunnis and Shias can't live together. This is absolutely untrue. Here, for example, in Pakistan, we have Sunnis and Shias living side by side. They work side by side. They live with each other. They observe each other's, customs and things. So it's not something that these are two very different religions. There are historically, there are narratives which are different, but as a whole, both follow the same religion.
Yes. So you're saying the Persians didn't like the Arabs and said, we hate you so much, we're going to have another branch of Islam just to be different from you. Is that what more or less happened?
Well, there is this historical, issue between the Persians and the Arabs in this sense, that the Persian Empire was, at that time, it was considered a sort of a superpower. And when Islam expanded, then that superpower was challenged, and there were these issues. It's more, we should not see this purely in religious terms only.
No,
The
I
conflict.
see it in political terms. So I suppose, so the Persians basically didn't want to say we're going to um, embrace Islam because it would mean that the Arabs had won. Do you think that was the reason why the Persians kind of, took Islam but said we have changed it to suit us better, and we don't want the Sunni version because we don't like you or something?
Well, I think this is more of, it's not that Shia-Sunni dispute is not purely an Arab and Persian dispute. There are Shias amongst the Arabs as well. And also there is diversity within Shias themselves. You don't just come across one kind of Shia. There are Shias who do not support the sort of Iranian regime and things like that. There are Shia scholars like that. There are Shias in Iraq who have a different view. It's not, that people of one ethnicity have embraced one religion and of another who have embraced another. It's pretty complicated. We can't generalize things. We can't brush over things just like that.
No,
It's
no.
quite, yes.
Um, but so talking about empires, I'm just reminded of the Ottoman Empire, and of course the Turkish are not Arabs either, are they? And they chose to embrace Sunni Islam rather than Shia Islam. Do you know the reasons behind it?
Well, I don't know much detail about the Ottoman ethnic rule and things like that, no. But what I have to say is that a Muslim dynasty, somebody who is in power, a dynasty in power, who adheres to Islam and what they do and what they do not do, is not necessarily an argument for or against Islam. If one wishes to study Islam, they need to go back to the original sources. Now, the Ottomans might have done some things which are valid, which are consistent with the Quran. They might have done something which goes against the Quran. So their conduct is not authority. We should not judge Islam by what the Ottomans did, or, for example, what the Saudis do or the Pakistanis do. We need to go back to the original source and revelation of Islam and see what that says, what is
Yes.
written with, yes.
Yes. Well, I suppose I'm just trying to apply what I know about British history to what I know about the Quran. And it seems to me that according to the Islamic rules of warfare, World War One and World War Two were not Islamic as far as the British were concerned because they were not defensive wars. And isn't it the case that the Quran only allows defensive wars?
Yes, that is true. There is no aggression permitted within the Quran. Quran does not allow taking of human life. It does not allow fighting non-combatants. So any such venture which violates Quranic principles cannot be termed as an Islamic campaign. So we need to judge the conduct of individuals in the light of the Quran. The Quran very clearly, it has rules related to fighting, and one should study all those rules. It's self-defense and to protect the weak and the vulnerable. These are the only two reasons given in the Quran for fighting. Either in self-defense or number two, to protect women and children, the weak, the vulnerable. These are the only two reasons mentioned in the Quran for use of force. Apart from this, there is no other reason that is mentioned with the Quran. You are not permitted to conquer somebody's country and land and force your religion upon them. You are not permitted to destroy churches or places of worship of any other faith. And we see things to the contrary. That if, for example, in the Quran, in chapter number 9, verse number 6, it says that if any of the polytheists, they want asylum from you, they seek asylum with you, then give them asylum, give them refuge. People of other faiths are welcome to live alongside Muslims if they are persecuted in their own lands. Muslims are obligated by the Quran to provide them refuge. So this is something that we should study and see what is in the Quran first of all. So Islam, as it is revealed in the Quran, does not allow supremacist or empire building and making other nations as slave nations. This is not permissible in the Quran. If some Muslim ruler or any dynasty has done that in the past, then they did so of their own accord. They were not following God's law. So we need to judge what is God's law by the Quran itself.
Yes, I can see that it could be interpreted in this way, that all defensive wars have the blessing of God, but all imperialistic wars do not have the blessing of God, even though they can be won.
I wouldn't agree with that.
No? Why not?
What has the blessings of God is that which is authenticated by the Quran. There are many secular wars that are happening in the world. There are petty disputes. There are things lying about. We shouldn't put God into everything. Okay, people do things of their own wishes and accords all the time. So that does not necessarily mean that God is on their side. Actually, the God of the Quran is against war. If you read chapter number 5, verse number 64, chapter number 5, verse number 64, it says, Kullama awqadu naran lil harbi atfaha Allah. Whenever they kindle the fire of war, Allah extinguishes it. Whenever they kindle the fire of war, God extinguishes it. So God is extinguishing the fires of war. God is not flaming the fires of war. Islam stands for peace. It stands for making your enemies into your friends. Okay, it is not advocating bloodshed. So we should.
There is a duty of jihad, isn't there?
Now, jihad, the Arabic word, needs to be understood. It literally means to make an effort, to struggle. If I'm praying 5 times a day, if I'm waking up early at 4 in the morning and performing ablution and making an effort, that is a jihad. If I'm looking after my mother, my old parents, this is also a jihad. If you are going for Hajj, this is also a jihad. If your community is under attack and you are defending it against an aggressor, then yes, that is also a jihad. But jihad does not mean holy war. This term is totally wrong. It is wrong to attribute this appellation, holy war, with the term jihad. The Arabic word for war is harb. In Arabic and in the Quran, the word for war is harb. There is no such thing as al-harb al-muqaddas or holy war in the Quran. The Quran does not advocate any such thing. And jihad literally means to strive, to struggle, to make an effort. And everything that a believer is to do, the struggle he makes for God in his life is jihad. Jihad is not just linked only to war and fighting only.